Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. Coming to you from our studio at Techtown in beautiful Detroit, Michigan, I am J.R. Stays, and across the table to my right is none other than Fletcher Sharp. How are you, man?
It was an eventful weekend. Some stuff happened, and now we're all here, and we're going to talk about the stuff that happened.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the stuff that happened and a bunch of local things. We've got a lot for you in this episode. We're going to keep it moving. But before we get started, I want to say thanks to somebody we both know, Fletcher, Mickey Lyons.
Yeah, Mickey's my buddy. Shouts out to Mickey. She's got one of the best dogs in the state, and Mac, so...
Best in the state?
Yeah, Mac is a great dog. I know she's going to hear this and disagree, but, like, Mac's one of the nicest, sweetest, just wants a hug. If he can sense something is wrong, he'll come up to you and give you his paw to be like, do you want a hug? His only problem is, like, he just likes to sniff butts too much, and, like, we can work with that.
Well, my thanks was not going to be for a dog, although I have met her dog, and he is a sweet boy. She brought by at our most recent happy hour, and we're going to announce our next get-together very soon, but at our happy hour at the Royce, she brought in an original 1930s, I don't know the exact year, but Detrola tabletop radio. If people don't know this, Detroit made a lot of things other than cars, whether it was radios, stoves, duck decoys, just all kinds of things. Detroit was a manufacturing center for a number of industries. And the Detrola radio was really the first major tabletop radio. Everyone sees online, or they kind of lust after those ones that are like cabinets that are like, that come up to your chest or whatever. You know what I'm talking about, those old style radio cabinets. Well, these were tabletops for the everyday working person. And Detrola was such a big deal that they even like white labeled their manufacturing for Sears and others. It is a name that you might see nowadays because it's changed hands a number of times. You might see a Detrola watch from Shinola. That is actually like another resurrected name. The original Detrola was radios, and Mickey Lyons brought a beautiful radio that is now sitting in our studio in pride of place. Detrola was in business from 1931 until 1948 when the automotive division sold off to Motorola. So like if there's like a Motorola automotive radio, there's roots all the way back to Detrola. It's a piece of work, Fletcher.
Yeah, Mickey has one of those larger radios that kind of goes up to your chest. And just, yeah, whether it's dogs, whether it's radio, whether it's just being generally a pretty great journalist in her own right, Mickey's great, and we love you very much.
Yeah, I don't have the courage to plug it in yet, but I will soon. My goal, apparently the tubes work. I want to get some Bluetooth going, maybe get the lights going for the dials so they can really have a nice little place here. And like on the weekends when there aren't people around, a little bit of jams here in the studio.
For sure.
So since we last recorded, let's get to the big story first. Well, President Joe Biden is not running for a second term. This runs through Michigan, as of course Michigan is one of the swing states. The latest since we last put out a show is that Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has come out and endorsed Kamala Harris, so has State Senator Mallory McMurrow and others. I wanted everyone on the team to have a shot at talking about this if they want to, and as the week progresses, since this is big news and it does involve Michigan and Detroit. And let's be honest, Joe Biden was a friend to Detroit in a lot of ways as far as funding and ARPA dollars and all that kind of stuff. And if there was anywhere that had a lot of support for Joe Biden, if you look at the poll numbers, it was Detroit. So Fletcher, what say you?
My mother sent me a text with a pink and green heart, which for those who don't know, my mother is an AKA. Kamala Harris is an AKA. It's one of the Divine Nine sororities and fraternities of Black college culture. They very much ride hard for their own people. So she was like letting you know now, like, there's already an AKA in the White House. Maybe she's going to be in charge of it. And I was like, we'll see, Mom. You know, also, how are you? How is everyone doing? But yeah,
Kamala is more important than her son.
It's kind of a surreal moment. It's good to see that Joe Biden kind of took some personal inventory after his last few things. I know he got dinged up a lot when they asked him the question, like, what do you think about running for re-election? He's like, as long as I give it, my best shot. And people were like, bro, like, the country is like hanging in the balance. We don't really care to give it your best shot. Like, if you don't think you can do this, like, please step aside. And I think the thing that kind of was a nail in the coffin for him was, of course, we all know Joe Biden's been in government for quite some time, like way more than just, 2008. But when I think his most well-known voters from that point were the people who knew him as President Barack Obama's vice president. So when the guy who kind of helped, I don't want to say revive your political career, but the guy who kind of put some more light for younger voters is now, there are rumors of him going around to many different Democratic people saying, I don't know if he can do this thing. I think that would have been the thing where, like, okay, you probably need to take some inventory and see if you can do this, because this guy who's supposed to be like your in-person media, like, good friend is like, I don't know if he's got it.
And who are you referring to?
Barack Obama.
Okay.
I'm like, if he's saying this, like, maybe.
So you think this was also a push from that direction as well? Because a lot of people online and in the online discourse are saying, well, he got railroaded, we're going to regret it, whatever. Do you think that, I mean, there was polling that came out. Do you think that Joe Biden could have beat Donald Trump?
I'm not really sure. I do know that as I've gotten older, I had to understand that, like, online discourse sometimes runs opposite of what's actually happening in the real world. But I do know that after the last debate with Donald Trump, both online and real world were like, ooh, that's bad. For people who, like, want to do, like, the numbers and get really deep into, like, what exactly means what, like, it might not have been that shaking. But for people who are like, I take the surface value of everything, watching someone go up there and, like, very much struggle in a debate, and then even have his opponent, who we don't think is much more capable than him, but enough to say, yeah, he doesn't even know what he's saying. Yikes, that's very bad. And if you're not going to do any sort of research, but you're just going to go off of that, seeing that would make you lose faith in that person immediately.
I got a notification just before we started recording that Kamala got $50 million in 24 hours in fundraising. And I hate to say it, but fundraising really matters in American elections in a lot of ways. Now, you mentioned about AKA, and this is a historic candidacy for a number of levels. How do you feel about this? Because I have heard a lot of interesting feelings about this first African-American, also Asian American and, Indian descent as well, woman, presidential major candidate. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great, just from the sake of like it being the first. I'm trying to measure my words carefully.
I would encourage you to go with your 10 toes, as you like to say.
Okay. Well, people know what my email address is if they want to respond to that. I do think it's going to require the people who say they want this to happen, actually to happen. And I do know, not to make it a racial point, but that does not mean the black women or even to some degree the black men. It's going to require people, from other demographics who have Black Lives Matter signs in their front yard, or have the hate has no home here signs, or the bumper stickers, or the equality bumper stickers on there. Like, it's going to require those people to then say, yes, I care about this thing and I actually want to step and make it happen. Because without those people, like, she's probably not going to win. It's not just the people who look like us type of vote. It's like people who actually want this change to happen. So, I mean, it's going to fall on some more people than they think. And just it really needs to happen, or else we're not going to see the first black woman / Asian American woman in the office.
Are you more excited about Kamala than you were Joe Biden? Do you feel more energized, and how do people around you feel?
My family is like, cool, it's another black person. Like, we're not a support only black household. We typically do support black people when we see them doing stuff, but like, we'll make sure it's not, someone who's doing some crazy stuff they shouldn't be doing. But I know my mother is excited, again, AKA. I know a lot of my friends who are AKAs are excited. The ski-wee that they like to admit when something goes well is like just very loud. It throws you off. I'll never forget the time that my stepfather is an Omega, which is another one of the fraternities. They had a charity basketball game at the Palace of Auburn Hills against the Kappas. And after they scored a basket, I heard like the dog barking, which is for Omegas. And I heard this very loud pitched like ee. And I felt like I was having a headache, and I turned over and like 50 or so AKAs were together celebrating with their little ski week. And my mother was with them. And I was like, Mom, no. And then I thought I was going to pass out. Because like just the ringing of just that noise hitting off of all of the state, I was like, this is too much. So like if Kamala were to win, I assure you that noise you hear is like not the world breaking. It's every AKA in one unison going ski-wee and like time and like everything distorting because of just how it works. I think it gives him a different approach politically because, I mean, she's obviously not much different than Joe Biden, but she's different. I mean, different in terms of appearance for sure, but she's different enough to where like you can now maneuver certain things, like certain people who maybe might not have wanted to donate towards, you know, this cause or like, all right, I'm kind of feeling a bit different. I mean, we already noticed 50 million within 24 hours of them announcing that Joe Biden was stepping down. And also, well, not stepping down as president, stepping down for re-election. But also, like, people see that and say, I might want to take a chance on this. I might want to do something. And I don't want to compare it to Barack Obama in the sense that they're both black people. But you do have some people who are like, I want to be a part of something different. And I mean, to a degree, it's kind of what happened with Donald Trump is I know a lot of people who voted for him were like, I want to do something that's different. I want to shake up whatever. I'm going to vote for this guy because he's not a politician. And we never had a not politician in the Oval Office, which to be fair, sure, we have not. We never had a reality TV star as president. And you did that right after we had the first black guy with the first reality TV person. So people like to be a part of moments like this because they feel like it centers us all together. So I think some people will see that and say, I want to be a part of this. I want to be here. So like when this person is in there, I can say that I helped do this.
What Kamala does is bring somebody who can do, and it's kind of cheesy and it's kind of annoying, but I get it. She's the kind of person who's like, yeah, she could be on Hot Ones. She could appear and do different things where you just could never see Joe Biden in those things, in those more culturally relevant areas. You just couldn't see Joe Biden exist in those spaces.
I say this not to like be funny, but like Hot Ones would literally, his body would shut down. That's I've had some of those sauces and even my body, could not handle it. If you give him the bomb, like I think it'd have to just cut right there. It's like, lost footage happening. But I will say this, whatever Maya Rudolph is doing, she should just clear off her schedule because like she's going to have a lot of work.
Come September when they get back on the air,
A
yeah.
lot of work just being Kamala for like, and if she wins, like she probably just doesn't have to, like that's it. Whatever passion project you have, shut them down because you're the president for the next 4 years. So...
Well, Fletcher, remember that auto insurance reform a while back? Well, there's a new article out. A really good investigative piece by Outlier Media is labeled Insurance Reforms Were Supposed to Bring Relief. Detroit drivers are still paying more because of where they live. This investigation is with Outlier and The Markup, and it shows that even after reforms, Detroiters are still facing some of the highest insurance rates in the nation, despite the 2019 law intended to lower costs by prohibiting the use of non-driving factors like zip codes. Well, insurers found new ways to use location-based pricing anyway. The investigation shows that these practices disproportionately impact black residents, with Detroiters paying significantly more than those in nearby suburbs. It is a good article getting into why these reforms fell short. If you're a listener to this show, you know that I was there when they signed this thing on the porch at Mackinac. I was skeptical then. I kind of ran the numbers and wasn't sure that this was going to deliver the savings that this bipartisan legislation promised it would, especially for Detroit drivers. And, you know, sometimes this is an example of where bipartisan, maybe, depending where you sit on this, bipartisan isn't always a good answer. And Michigan overall still has some of the highest insurance rates in the nation. I feel a bit emotional about this because as a Detroiter, I feel like I kind of got sold down the river.
Yeah, I've been a victim of this. It's why I hate to say it, but like why one of the few moments where I've been like, you know what, like this really does suck, but like it's kind of glad I live in Grosse Pointe. And I've shown it. When I got my first car, that was my own car, off of anyone else's insurance, my own thing, I had to go put it on somewhere. It was an older car, so I knew insurance would be a bit higher as a result. I mistakenly put in the address across the street from me, and it gave me like one of like the price adjusting for what it was. And it was across the street from where I used to live on Beaconsfield by Mac. Is like, I live in Grosse Pointe, where across the street is Detroit. I put in the address across the street, went to Detroit, put it in. It was supposed to be like $700 something a month. And I was like, no. So I corrected it, put in my actual address. dropped down to like $490, and I was like, that's not right. And I went and called Progressive to make sure, and they're like, yeah, no, like it's this because of this, and no fault. And I was like, I understand all that, but like, you mean to tell me if the distance it would take for me to throw a tennis ball from my porch and hit the house literally across Mac, you mean to tell me like that's a $300 difference? And they're like, well, I guess so. And I was like, that's insane. Like, I had an accident where someone went through a yield sign and hit my car. And of course I was upset because like I didn't do anything wrong. They went through a yield and they hit me. But after the annoyance went off, I immediately felt bad for them because I was like, my insurance might go up a little bit, but like yours is totaled. Like whatever you were paying, like double that and maybe even more. And like and it stinks because it gets so high that like when I was a kid, I remember one of my football coaches did not have insurance, and he would like drive around real slow at most times because like I don't have insurance. And I would always wonder like why? Like why don't you you're an adult, have insurance, so you should be doing these things. But then as I got older and saw the prices, I'm like, I understand why. And it puts people like in the article, it puts them in a really weird spot where it's like, I can't afford to pay for insurance because it's so high, but I can't afford to not use my car because I have to get to work to pay for these things, or I have to get my kids somewhere. It puts them in such a weird predatory spot. It's really messed up.
Look, it's for my health and it's better for me, but I bike to work in part because I can't afford car. Like I can't, we have to split a car at the house because that's just the reality. And people are stunned by that, but I'm able to adjust my life to make that work most of the year. And it's annoying, but it's also the truth.
Like, I don't want to sound like conspiracy theory-esque because like that's not right, but it feels like it's intentional. Like all these other states that either they have public transit that works really well, you see that the rates for their stuff for cars are low, or they have roads that like are mostly able to go over and be workable and like drivable and bikeable and such. But you get here and we have it to where things are so spread apart to where like you have to drive, but also the bike lanes really aren't clear enough for you to like bike through, and the roads even around there necessarily aren't the best, and there's no public transit, so like you have to use your car, and also we're going to charge you a lot more money for it. Whereas I have friends who left the city to go to San Francisco, which like is pretty close about stuff, but also there's things that are spread out pretty far apart, and they're like, it's fine because like we have very clear and defined bike lines where like we know where we can go and they can definitely see us, and we're not worried about someone mowing us over with a car at some time of the day. Like we're okay with this type of stuff and also we have a car that if we need to use it, it's affordable to use. Whereas here it's like, well, you better hope that pothole got fixed in the bike lane, or else you're going to have to go around and hope no one clips you with their mirror, and they're definitely not going to stop when they do it. So it feels like it's either you got to do this thing and do these other parts, or don't and get nothing done. Whereas other places have it to where you have other options. And like, it's crazy. You'd think that if they didn't have a better public transit, or they didn't have the roads that were able to be navigated easier, they didn't have ways that people who wanted to use a scooter or a bike or something were able to get around, you'd think that stuff would be cheaper as a result. You'd think it'd cost more in other places because you have more options, where it's like whatever. But instead it's like, no, it's like we don't have to lower anything because you're going to have to do it. Like you have to do it or you just don't go anywhere. And like it feels really predatory, and that's just not a good feeling to have.
Well, Fletcher, I do try to end on a happy note, but you know what? Sometimes we got to talk a little truth.
Yeah, I mean, happy notes are great, but also this is real life, and sometimes real life, ends poorly.
All right, well, with that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Fletcher Sharp.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit. You are appreciated. Until tomorrow, remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.